Hello, I'm Kaylee Ray. Before we get into the actual content of the video, I wanted to say a few things. I'll be using APA to do in-text citations for the video, and the citation will appear on the screen as I am discussing the content in a paraphrased form, and the full list of citations will be available in the comments. The video is not meant to be a super in-depth discussion of archaeometry. It's just a quick, easy to understand introduction based on the things that I've learned in my archaeometry class this semester. I'm using a case study to present the information to make it a little bit easier to understand. I've included some drawings in this video. They're crude depictions, they're not brilliant, they're just kind of there to get the point across. Not super accurate, just I did the best I could. And I also want to note that I am looking down a lot, and I know I'm following a script. It's just easier for all of us. I sound a lot better when I'm following a script. If you hear any noises, I live with other people and I can't really do anything about that. Archaeometry is an interdisciplinary approach to archaeology. It can produce quantitative data like dates and also chemical structures, among other things. Archaeometry can be used to aid in the reconstruction of ancient manufacturing technology and for provenancing. Provenancing means to source something, to figure out where it's from. I picked my method of archaeometric analysis because it can be conducted on my material of choice, wool, and can provide information that we don't have from the initial research conducted on the wool. I picked a collection of chasubles held at the Wawel Cathedral to act as the site or as the artifacts for the purpose of this video. The chasubles are held in the cathedral treasury room, and they are conserved and restored to be held in the cathedral museum. The chasubles that were previously analyzed date to the Jagiellonian dynasty and were intended for categorizing and conservation purposes, not for use in the cathedral. The study that we are considering for further analysis was conducted by two chemists, and they determined the type of dye that was used for the purpose of conservation of the chasubles. Why were chemists conducting this work? Isn't archaeometry a subset of archaeology? Wow. Just a moment ago in the previous section, I mentioned that archaeometry is interdisciplinary. In the case of the chemists, they're doing the work for the Wawel Cathedral so that those who are in charge of the collection can conserve and restore the garments better. Using the chasubles, we will explore considerations that an archaeologist and the collaborators have to take into consideration or take into account while deciding on what type of archaeometric technique they should be using. Strontium ion analysis is similar to carbon dating because it compares isotopes. Strontium has an isotopic ratio in the purposes of this video. The ratio that we're concerned with is that of the strontium-87 ion and the strontium-86 ion. There's other ions too, but those do not pertain to the work we're doing here. Strontium ion levels are due to the age of the geological features, the rocks, of an area. The levels of strontium can be analyzed from tooth enamel or bones in the context of human remains, or in our case, wool. Strontium isotope analysis is used to provenance an individual. So in the case of wool, the analysis will match up with the provenance of the sheep or the animal that produced the wool. The strontium analysis provides the feeding zone of the animal. In order for the results of a strontium analysis to have any meaning, there must be baseline levels of strontium to compare. To acquire the baseline of an area, a proxy is used. There's not an agreed upon standard for the proxy, but some of the materials that can act as a proxy include the water, plants, or soil of an area. The ratio of strontium stays relatively constant within an organism over time, which is why this method of analysis works. The organism eats and drinks from the area, and the strontium ion value remains in the materials found in the archaeological record, such as our chasubles. Samples are dissolved, and then the solution is measured by a thermal ionization mass spectrometer to determine the ratio of the strontium ion. So, there are a few things that we need to be considering when we're using strontium isotope analysis. One of them is that it is a destructive type of analysis. As we mentioned in the previous section, the samples are dissolved. In my case, I considered this, and I thought that's okay because it's not a ton that's needed. In the case of tooth enamel, you only need a little bit, right? And in the case of a garment, well, that's a lot bigger than a tooth, so you're not destroying a whole lot of the garment. There can be a few issues with strontium isotope analysis. One such issue is that wool sometimes has an artificially raised strontium value because of surrounding materials. Mainly, excess strontium is due to the wool being buried in a wet environment, and groundwater clings to the wool, altering the strontium levels. In samples of wool that do not have any color treatment, nitrogen cleaning can correct the strontium levels and allow for an accurate reading. Another way to ensure optimal results is to remove the lipids in wool fibers, because that's where a large portion of contamination occurs. Strontium ion values can show potential trade routes, and non-local strontium levels are expected of belongings of wealthy or high-status individuals in a community. With the chasubles, there is already information about where they're from, but sometimes records are wrong or aren't as detailed as we would like. And sometimes wool, in this case, may be sourced from much farther than the location where it was actually processed and used. In this case, considering the chasubles were donated by aristocrats and high-ranking people, possibly there's an expectation that the wool was provenanced from far because they were wealthy. And we can infer that maybe they wanted the highest quality wool. Or maybe it was sourced from near and they wanted to show off the quality of their locally produced wool, and there might have been great prestige associated with locally produced wool being used in a chasuble at the Wawel Cathedral. So archaeometry and archaeometric methods, you can learn a lot from them. They're really good for supplemental types of information when you're doing archaeology, because with archaeology you'll be looking at your collection of material culture, your artifacts, and you can get some information, right? But you can't always get as much information as you'd like, and with archaeometry you can add to that information. You can find out where something is from, you can find out how old it is, dating is a huge one in archaeometry. All sorts of things are carbon dated, which is why I mentioned it earlier, because I think that's one that everybody has a familiarity with.